there is a framework of what love is, how we work, but we don't have one that is necessarily the broadcast one, the standard. You're not necessarily taught it in any meaningful way. Because when I say love, what do I even mean? For some people, they think romantic love, like the way I love my wife and the way we love partners. But there's times in which we no longer love those partners. What does that mean? What is falling out of love? What is love? Platonic love. My friends. I love my friends, but I don't love them like I love a love interest. There's a difference between lust and sex and love, but there's something also tied when it comes to intimacy and trust. We don't necessarily talk about that because we don't talk about love. Familial love, right? I love my stepchildren. I love my family members. I love them, but it's different. It's not the same type of love for every different. It's not the same type of love all the way across, but it's a connection. I choose to use the description from Robert Heinlein, or at least the definition from Robert Heinlein about love. I find that the most productive and useful in explaining it. And love is that condition in which something else's happiness is intrinsic to your own. I'm paraphrasing his a little bit. I think he says people, but the idea is that something else's something else other than you is just as important as you to yourself. That it's happiness, that it's doing well, is just as important, like a body part. It's a part of you. You're entangled. And that makes so much sense because it has nothing to do with lust or divinity or kismet or you're meant to be or chemistry. It's about being a social animal and working as a social animal, needing to make very strong long-term bonds. Being a creature of active inference and being a creature in this environment in which you're built and meant to work with others. Love is an intrinsic part of that. It's part of how we experience each other in the world. It's not just chemicals. It's not just dopamine. It's not just a circuit firing in your brain. It's not just primordial instincts to get you to go screw. It is your construction. That's why there's so much variability. But it's tied to a fundamentally, not just human, fundamental aspect of being a social animal and connection and bonding and trust and intimacy. And that might sound interesting or weird or counterintuitive, but you know why? That's because we're not taught what love is. Any absorption of what love is, I had a rough childhood. I don't know about you, but I did not have exposure to good examples of active, healthy love in action. My family was not particularly affectionate. We didn't hug a whole lot. I wasn't very comfortable with hugging. It wasn't until later in my adulthood in which I did become comfortable with it. It wasn't learned from that. I wasn't exposed to these things. And when I was growing up, most of how I inferred love was from media, like most people, because we're not sat and taught. If we are taught in an academic situation, it's through the context of history. Helen of Troy's face launched 1,000 ships. When we study love through academia, it's very light. It's not to step on anybody's toes. And it's through the ideas of what societal norms were at the time, how it applied to literature, very romantic and idealized looks at it, poetry, not practical ideas about it, what it actually means. There's not really a very good source anywhere for that. It's either, it can be religious, it can be from self-help or pop psychology, it can be from a lot of different sources, but most of us adapt it from Disney, adapt it from TV, media. And there's a certain narrative that is taught, that is imbibed through most people, and it doesn't matter if you're the West or East or anywhere, that's where we're taught. If you're not taught it and it's a part of your life, you absorb it and you build models for it because you have to. That's how we work. That's a creature of active inference. That's a social animal. We have to engage. We're not meant to work on our own. The working together and working well together is not a byproduct of something. That is the product. That's the point. And love is one of those facilitators. Part of nature, it's real. But to experience it, you have to be actively engaged with it, right? When we talk about active inference before, if you don't know something exists, if you don't believe it to be true, you don't see it, you can't experience it, you have difficulty dealing with it. That's what I had with love. I didn't understand what it was. People were giving me love, but I wasn't experiencing it. I was the bottleneck. It wasn't the universe. And it wasn't just my chemicals, and it wasn't just my drinking, and it wasn't just my history. It wasn't just bad memories. It wasn't just my genetics. It was that I didn't understand love. Therefore, I could not experience it because I couldn't model it. I fundamentally feel that was one of my core problems. And that's one of the core reasons of doing this podcast, is to express that I know other people do not understand it the same way I do now, because they were like me then.